What's really lovely is that OCTAVOX is a real hybrid of different things. It can be a harmonizer, it can be a multi-tap delay, it can create arpeggios, it will allow you to do vocal doubling, it'll allow you to do vocal harmonizing. There's a whole host of different things it will allow you to do, all within this very simple interface. So again, it might look a bit complex, but we'll break it down. So we've got up to 8 voices. And again, if you were to look at it through a traditional delay lens, like say, for example, like a multi-tap delay, you could say that each of these 8 points, these voices, are actually like taps on a delay. But what's really unique is that Eventide have taken a much more musical approach to this, rather than looking at it in terms of delay times and interval, pitching in terms of like semitones, for example. They've actually looked at it in a much more music theory centric way, which actually is really lovely, because what I found when I first started using it way back in 2015 when I worked with Sasha, it was actually one of those plugins that helped me to kind of up my music theory game a little bit and really get to understand how things look on notation, because what you might be able to see is that the colours of the points that work from yellow at the top here on voice 1 all the way down to more of a red on voice 8 is obviously each of these points are numbers. So not only is it giving you the delay on a musical staff in terms of like how far behind the note that's triggering the sequence here in OCTAVOX is, it's also the pitches as well, and you can work in intervals like perfect fifths, perfect fourths, octaves, unisons, all of that good stuff. And you do get the ability to offset and detune each point in terms of pitch. So what's really nice in this situation is that you also have the ability to pan from left to right, as you can see here. And we're going to really play around with this when we get into the main ARP here, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this patch on the ARP channel, which we're going to get into a little bit later on, as a bit of a jumping off point for doing something a lot more complex and being able to actually, start things from scratch, shall we say, and look at harmonization and actually look at one of the most powerful things within OCTAVOX, which is the ability to actually pretty much take a monophonic synth and actually make it polyphonic, essentially, through the way that the harmonizations can actually work. And they're very, very nice indeed and very, very strong. So again, you can mix individual points, you can pan them left to right. And again, the delay times here might look quite complex. However, if I were to move, like, say, for example, point 1 here, you can see the delay time is at 0, which means it coincides with the root note. So the interesting thing here is that the dry-wet control is all the way over in the wet, and that means we're actually not hearing any of the original sound, although the way that the voice 1 is set up, it is actually mimicking that original sound. And then the rest of the sequence kind of takes over. So we've got the ability now to move, and as you can see, I can move it in increments. And essentially you've got, again, 4 increments per beat. Again, this line here in the notation, so don't worry if you're not too confident with reading sheet music. This actually will help you. It's very similar to reading the grid in Ableton or a DAW of your choice, where you can, again, offset things by 1, 2, 3, 4 16th notes, and the whole thing is laid out like a 16th note grid in your DAW, which is a very, very easy thing to work with. And again, we can, as you've just seen, grab a delay point, grab a voice and move it both up and down in terms of pitch, and you can see I've moved it up a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. Again, I'll be able to move it up to 6th, 7th, an octave, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, and you can go all the way up to 2 octaves up and 2 octaves down. So it's a really nice range that you can kind of sweep through there. So very, very cool. And again, I'll just drop that back down. Again, for those who aren't music aficionados in terms of music theory and notation, this line just underneath the beginning of the staff here is in middle C. Now, this is also an important point. If I show you the actual note, and again, this is what's really lovely, this one note is triggering the entire sequence, and you will get that sequence every time you trigger a MIDI note. The funny thing is that you'll notice that the key and the scale is actually C major. However, my note that I'm triggering in is in D. Now, that isn't that much of an issue, purely because what it's doing is offsetting by certain intervals, and it'll work on whatever note that you're using on. However, when we get into more complex arpeggios, as we will later on, the scale and the key starts to matter a little bit, because it can do some really interesting changes in flavor, and we'll go through some presets and we'll build our own elements out as well. So again, what we can do here, and again, if we want to mono that down, again, I've already monoed it in the utility plugin, but again, this was actually just something that is there to demonstrate the plugin, but I actually really like the bass line, so I can kind of make everything a bit more center and, you know, be able to be a bit more, shall we say, mono. So again, it just gives a nice bubble and it grooves really nicely with the kick. And again with the drum machine. And it's got that lovely, almost like kind of a borderline sort of tech housey kind of rumble to it, which I really, really like.